Okay, it's plugged in now.
Krishna, up here. Okay. Question. Have we determined, oh, it's gonna be, we don't need to turn these off, that would be fine? Okay. And also, can I get Jason to give me a mic on or off, or is that over there?
Mark is doing it.
Okay.
We are ready.
I'm ready.
Talking to the mic. It's on. It's on.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
You're on.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Jeff, you're on. Stop hitting it. You're on.
Oh, I am on.
Yes.
Okay.
Lower the music, it's just background. Much lower.
So you want to turn it down a little?
Yeah.
Okay.
Frank Henry. David Hill. Floyd Huff. Steve Allen. Rock Hudson. Jay Jesso. Scott Lago. Pierre LeJoy. Tim Manfred. Keith Landau. Don LePain. Tommy Liego. Dr. John Long. Russ Marley. Bernie McLaughlin. Freddie Mercury. Alan Miller. Jose Busquets. Hugo Newhouse. Novasuto. Dan Norton. Alan Rickman. Vince Romano. Dr. Jack Royer. Vito Russo.
Arthur Ashe, Javier Padilla, Brother Damian Ball, Michael Bennett, Vaughn Boyle, Michael Brody, Jack Castor, Mel Sharon, Ron Edwards, Harry Ellis, Dick Belton, Josh Belcher, Waylon Flowers, Brian Foley, Lynn Francis, Simon Franklin, Peter Frost, Dr. David Bookman, and my brother Lucas Gomez, Keith Herring, Jim Hawk, Peter Hawthorne, Ron Henderson.
Amos Abrams. Mark Ackerman. Peter Allen. Renee Alvarez. David Amina, Hank Henderson, Jeffrey Hatter, J.K. Atun, John Hartman, Mark Bard, Keith Barrow, Chuck Berry, Herbert Barton, Eddie Barton, Denise Gascon, John Castillo, Rudy, Jimmy Bedingfield, Tandy Bellew, Michael Bennett, Gary Berner, Terry Decker,
Tom Sands, Tim Scott, Arturo Says, John Shanahan, Randy Schiltz, Will Schott, Scott Singleton, David Slater, Harry Stoff, Dater Terry, Lamar Tracy, Dr. Tom Waddell, Buddy Warren, Ryan White, Paul Lucas, Pedro Zamora,
Francis Brady, Jerry Brainerd, Joe Bastia, Bob Beschlaw, Arthur Beanham, Michael Beretti, Bill Albert Tenbrink, Jeff Britton, Michael Brody, Bob, Gary, and Jack Burrock, Anthony Bruno, Buck, Sean Buchanan, Jim Burgess, Lynn Caldwell, Dale Caldwell, George Kaya, Michael Cowan, John Kadori, Israel Camacho, Andy Carlos, Paul Caro, Bruce Caro, Richard Carpenter, Guillermo Cash,
Jack Castor, Bob Shivano, Bob Sassis, Christopher Chadman, Jay Chavon, Cherry Charlton, Richard Chenault, Mel Sharon, Tina Chow, Robert Christian, Richard Christopher, Ron Christopher, Richard Christopher, Alberto Chitron, Charlie Coco, Terry Chogan, Stuart Colby, Ricardo Collins, Frederick Combs, Raul Champagno, Glenn Cooper, Rogo Orbey, Peter Corallo, Michael Portman, Joe Tacuno, Stephanie Krepp.
Arthur Duval, Klaus Eberling, Jeff Edholm, Terry Ellis, Stephen Michael Andres, Phil at Whistler, James Van, Richard Falau, Nathan Fang, David Feinberg, Mark Feldman, Dennis Ferdinand, Jim Farrell, Bill Farrelly, Dick Fisher, Peter Fitzgibbons, Patricia Thacker, Dennis Florey, Richard Flowers, Ray Ford, Ron Farella, Danny Fortus, Donald Forsythe, Gary Franks, Morris Free.
Steve Freeman, Jeffrey French, Leonard Ray, Louis Friedman, Charles Fritzlow, Eugene Carpano, Robert Garcia, Will Garcia, John Gowell, Ken Gello, Allison Gertz, David Genn, Jim Gibb, Tom Glantz, Elizabeth and Ariel Glazer, Russell Glenn, Griffin Gold, Bobby Goldsmith, Mitch Gonzalez, Ricky Gonzalez, Jose Gonzalez, Miguel Gondro, Chaz Goward, Lee Graham, Morgan Gray, Joe Graziano.
Joe Ifter, John Lola, Richard Isay, Raymond Jacobs, Alvin Javin, Joseph Jerk, Lloyd Jenkins, Mary Jenkins, James Jenkins, baby Jessica, David Jessup, Tim Johnson, Edward Fred Johnson, Jim Jones, John Jones, Don Young, Max Justice, Ted Cadigas, Duke Town, Bruce Carraro, Ron Heel, J.J. Keeley, Patricia Kelly, Larry Hurt, Bill Concoy, Chris Moses,
Antonio, Judith, Ernesto, Lyndon, Rafael, Eduardo, Fernando, Alejandro, Robinson, Eduardo, Fernando, Noel, Wilfredo, Jose Gregorio, Francisco, Cesar, Mario, Rafael, Ricardo, Romero, Santiago, Carlos Eduardo, Luis Alejandro, Johnny, David, Carlos, Wilmer Jose Francisco, Tim Green, Eric Greg, Stephen Gross, Larry Gutenberg, Ron Hefla, Don Hall, Tony Hammer, Steve Hamilton, Keith Haring, Chuck Harper, Jean Haviland, Hazel Jack Henderson, Clarence Henderson, Hal Heppenhoff, Dan Higgins, Robert Hilferty, Robert Hilferty, Michael Hirsch, Fritz Holt, Steve Park Holt, Gwen Holt, Mark Hooker, Bart Hopple, Drew Howlett, Rock Hudson.
Rima Kogel, Carl Vanderrook, Scott Lago, Stephen Lance, Dan Lanning, Kurt LeBeau, David Lee, David Lemos, Leonard Lentz, Liberace, Salvador Licata, Michael Lipton, Daryl Loberg, Kenny Locke, Ron Holt, Bobby Long, Diego Lopez, Antonio Lopez, Dennis Lopez, Carl Lorenzen, Al Lynch, Roger Lyon, John Montana, MD, Stephen Mack.
Doug Backen, Claude Malhot, Bruce Mailman, Alan Lambert, Phil Maciero, Christopher McGaney, Philip Massini, Robert McInthorpe, Russ Marley, Willie Marquez, Mary, Leonard Matlock, Gary May, Tom McBride, Barry McGill, Larry McFitt, Joseph McGurphy, Roger McFarland, Aldith McKean, Al McNur, Bill McIntyre, Peter McWilliams, George Melton, Michael Merrifield, Peter Middendorf, Douglas McLoss, Mario Pablo Reddy, Hector Frank, Hector Omar Amilcar, Selma Marisol, Jesus Olga, Raul Jesus, Miguel Angel, Victor Carlos Jose Gregorio, Pablo Jose Luis, Oscar Abel, Luis A. Jesus de Jesus, Hasnin Carlos Elias.
Enrique Eduardo Jose Luis Rolando Lino Oscar Jorge Roberto Yaro Carlos Luz Alexander Gonzalo Douglas Roberto Cristobal Hector Victor Alec Chio Alejandro Armando Lucio Jose Antonio
Carlos, Feliz, Giovanni, Michelle, Orlando, Chucha, Rafael, Hector, Orlando Jose, Armando, Edgar, Rafael, Randy, Andres, Pepe, Elias, Eduardo, Cookie, Julio C, Nestor Armando, Javier, Pablo, Roger, Antonio, Edgar, Manuel, Efrain, Ifroni, Oscar, Ricardo, Marcelino, Fernando, Marco Antonio, Andres Eloy, Felipe, Jose, Andres, Herman, Mariana, Manuel, Santiago, Yvonne, Nancy, Pedro, Elias, Jose Antonio, Amin Schiller, Angelo, Marco, Omar, Gioconda, Dimas, Pedro,
Court Miller, Paul Monte, Rafael Montijo, Patrick Morton, Mayor Morgenstern, Greg Norris, Larry Euler, Lance Milwaukee, Nara, Louis Nasny, Max Navari, Bill Nelson, Kenneth Nelson, Mario Nicholas, Simon Nicoti, Buddy Noro, Otto Nuri, Mary Nurse, Scott Oakley, Michael Palm, Anthony Rapp, Wally Pasha, Larry Patterson, Anthony Pearson, Larry Peck,
Carlos, Fernando, Cesar Augusto, David, Renee, Jean Thomas, Alfredo, Alberto Jose, Marco, Luis Alfonso, Victor, Hector, Edgar, Luis, David, Lourdes, Nixon, Ramon, Hector, Santiago, Carlos, Fernando, Pedrico, Miguel, Mickey, Gustavo, Rafael,
Ruben, Eduardo, Ramon, Alejandro, Manuel, Miguel Daniel, Mauricio, Julio, Carlos, Yanni, Morado, Norris, Alfredo, Milton, Alex Jose, Maria, Amanda, Julio, Valentin, Jose N, Luis Alberto, Jose, Jose Miguel, Robinson, Juan Jose,
Oscar, Luis David, Fernando, Miguel Angel, Jose Vicente de Santi Serrano, Micaela, Marielana, Jose Rafael, Cesar Jesus, Jorlel, Domingo Antonio, Giovanni, Victor, Marlon, Pedro, Roger, Miguel Angel, Luis, Nestor, Nelson, Leo, Julio,
Anthony Perkins, Glenn Pearson, Nathaniel Peer, Frank Piscotty, Robert Pittman, Eno Porsche, David Fu, Paul Popman, Sheldon Post, Shelley Post, Stephen Rausner, Keith Prince, Kyle Fresco, Tom Proctor, Sal Lorena, Joseph Hussey, Peter Quiznos, Bob Rofsky, Paul Rappaport, Gene Anthony Ray, Tom Records, Sharon Red, Russell Redmond, Orland Riley, Alan Renow, Johnny Resco,
Jose. Francisco Jacinto Italo, Angel Orlando Luis, Angel Carlos Luis Apolinar, Angel Juan Ramon Hidalgo Alfredo Jonathan Jesus Maritza Andres Carlos Jamin Cristobal Alexis Bernabe Javier Rolando
Alan Rickman, Ed Ryder, Nick Rock, Rob Rod, Jimmy Roddy, Jose Rodriguez, Craig Rodell, Pamela Rogan, Nell Rosen, Mark Rosenfeld, Tom Rubel, Vito Russo, Renee Rose, Richard Sabado, Jose Jim Salomon, Tom Sands, Robert Santiago, Luis Santiago, Al Schaff, Jonathan Schaefer, Gene Schroeder, Bill Scott, Tim Scott, Elliot Siegel, Ken Shapiro,
David Jose Gregorio Herman Jose Angel Wolfon Hermoso Ulises Jose Gregorio Gustavo Daniel Oscar Luis Valmira Celso Israel Hermoso El Suizo Jorge Alexis Omar Hector Victor
Cutter Sharp, Michael Sean, Sonny Sherman, Randy Schultz, Carl Sigmund, David Sipos, Michael Clark, Bill Small, Clint Smith, Willie Smith, Rick Smith, Michael Smith, Alan Soper, David Sparrow, Peter Spar, Robert Spellman, Christopher Spencer, Ron Stanford, Ed Shirley, Tom Stoddard, Larry Stripling, Ken Struthers, Ramon Juarez, David Summer,
Jonathan Suskin, Ben Sustin, Swenson, Sylvester, John Takikos, Terry Tabito, Bob Teal, Dale Tessler, Ryan Thomas, Rick Tiger, Harry Tolera, Patrick Toner, Robert Letourneau, Bernard Turner, Alstair Usher, Israel Valentine, Raphael Vasquez, Van Vickers, Peter Vogel, Jasper Watson, Gary Wagner, Daniel Warner, Drexel Watson, Bob Weaver, Ryan White, and Charles Whiteside.
And my friend Otto Marx.
Just like you stick
There's got to be a dance floor in heaven, right? In fact, maybe all it is a dance floor. I'm looking forward to it. I'm Pastor Mark Urson. I'm pastor here at St. John's. And to state the obvious, it is so good to see you. Last year, I walked into the empty sanctuary carrying a candle, and my husband was filming me on his camera, and it was part of our virtual gathering last year, which many of you tuned into. But nothing beats getting together and being together tonight. But we also have learned lessons in a pandemic, and so we're also welcoming those who are watching from home, and glad that they could be a part of this in other locations. So I accomplished something recently I'm very proud of. I did my first AIDS ride. And I don't say that to beg applause. Everett will tell you I'll do other things to beg applause, but not. We did 165 miles from Miami to Key West in 2 days, and it was amazing. And I'm already signed up for next year, so I'm hooked. But the reason I bring it up is because at orientation, somebody said something that brought me back to this gathering tonight. And she told us that we were riding, especially for those people who thought they were being forgotten. And that's why we gather tonight, to make sure that no one is forgotten, whether they be those who we miss, some whose names were just read, some whose quilts are hanging around us, or those who are at home, those who maybe are struggling, those who are feeling alone. We are here to let everyone know they are not forgotten. No matter how long this goes on, we will not forget, and we will continue to gather. And so I thank you for being brave and gathering here tonight, for taking the precautions that you're taking to be safe and to be here tonight. A big thank you to Brent and Krishna and Jeff and Barbara and all the people a part of Out of the Darkness who have brought this wonderful gathering here to St. John's for the last, I don't know, what is it, 4 years? Has it been 4 years already? 5 or 6. Is it that long? Again, I just hope it goes on forever. So welcome. I'm not going to talk too much. There are people who have much more important things to say, but a warm welcome tonight and a warm welcome to you to everything that happens here at St. John's. This isn't just the only time when you are welcome here. You are welcome always. And I hope I'll see you again at other events, but a warm welcome to you all. Tape marks. You got tape marks.
Hi, I'm Larry Maris. I'm one of the co-founders of Gay Men's Health Crisis. I prepared a little statement for World AIDS Day today. I'm calling it "No Victory is Too Small." When the first AIDS cases were reported in 1981, we felt overwhelmed, to say the least. We weren't sure what we were dealing with. Was it an STD? Was it biological warfare? What was clear is that whatever it wasn't going to be good for the gays. We had no civil liberties and were only a few years out from having been declassified as having a mental disorder, a decision many psychiatrists resented and wanted to repeal. Prior to that time, gays were subjected to shock treatments, lobotomies, aversion therapy, and prison sentences in efforts to cure us. If you wore drag in public, even on Fire Island, you could be sent to prison. If you were found out, you were fired from your job and disowned by your family. Suicide and murder rates were off the charts. The odds against us were in fact overwhelming. Yet somehow we stepped forward. A small group of us began writing articles and informational flyers, stuffing envelopes for small-scale fundraisers, and setting up a hotline for medical referrals and services. In fits and starts, we became a collective we embracingly called Gay Men's Health Crisis. This was our crisis, and we knew we had to own it. From its inception, we were attacked from within and without. Yet we persevered and prevailed to become a leading resource of AIDS education, research, and supportive services. In the early period of AIDS, there was a lot of denial and panic. Many people couldn't or didn't want to deal with the bad news. The worst part was the uncertainty of what we were dealing with. It would be 3 more years before HIV was established as the cause of AIDS, albeit in the face of ongoing denialism. Meanwhile, the blame game went into high gear and never lost momentum. Eventually, as a result of heroic activist efforts, effective treatment became available and the epidemic seemed transformed, riding an unprecedented wave of public favor that yielded major advancements for gay rights. We were unprepared for the drastic reactionary implosion of much of this progress in the wake of the Trump presidency. So where do we go from here? With our own proud and recent example of AIDS activism to inspire and empower us, we go forward just as we did before, when the odds against us were even worse. Not like far-right extremists, but like ourselves in the early days of AIDS, when we're hit hard again, as now, we need to double down, step up, act up, and fight back. Pseudoscience, disinformation, intimidation, and violence are not our game. What is our game is civil disobedience, perseverance, resilience, and the courage of grace under fire, of knowing we're in the right and being willing to fight for that in what Republicans like to call the long game. Now is not the time to stand back from AIDS challenges. Despite extraordinary gains, AIDS still impacts millions of people globally, especially the disenfranchised and underserved. We still don't have a cure, nor a preventive vaccine. 2 supremely worthy goals GMHC and ACT UP co-founder Larry Kramer pushed for continuously and in his final writings and speeches. Though ACT UP is no longer in high gear, we can all take heart and inspiration from its experience and example. We tend to think of ACT UP as this ferociously courageous army of warrior activists that did frontline life and death battle, heroes who, despite the David and Goliath odds against them, won levels of glory and achievement without precedent in the annals of grassroots healthcare activism, medicine, and science. While all of that is true, the reality of ACT UP, as captured by Sarah Schulman in speaking about her book, Let the Record Show, on the history of ACT UP, is that the philosophy that powered that organization, beneath its shouted out and justified anger, was its attitude of humility and tolerance, of encouraging and facilitating everyone to do what they could. It's a concept that goes back to Teddy Roosevelt and that you hear in the rooms of recovery. Do what you can with what you have, where you are. So whether you're Larry Kramer, Maxine Wolf, Peter Staley, Ann Northrup, Sarah Schulman, Judy Peabody, Krishna Stone, or that shining light of World AIDS Day, Brent Nicholson Earl, do what you can with what you have, where you are. We don't all have to be stars of activism and service to make a difference. We just have to care and be willing to try. Much of what has been achieved has been modest, behind the scenes, and unheralded efforts that bind and reinforce those that seem more decisive. If there is one lesson we've learned from it all, it's that no victory is too small. That victory can be anything from just showing up to a meeting, to making a call, sending an email, speaking up and out to a friend, family member, or colleague, to running a marathon, joining the AIDS walk, or riding your bike for AIDS awareness and funding. Wherever you are, wherever you are, the takeaways are the same. Do what you can with what you have, where you are.
You still remain living on in my tears and and missing you was all I knew. But in time, the pain has gone. Picked up the pieces and moved on. I go, and I'm still tall, red, Mary, David.
Life goes, they say. Now I'm back, working, dancing, just making it through. Forgive me, angel, what else can I do?
Shelley, Peter, Diego, Manny, Bob, Jessica, John. Don't stop to remember. It's not that we don't love you. It's not that we don't care. But you know that no one will be. And living doesn't spare the time to remember that you're always there. It's time to entertain angels unawares. Gotta stop, look and listen. See the angels, hear the angels. See the angels, are hearing hearts. Whispering, Diego, Manny, Bob, Jessica, we are your brothers. We are your brothers. We're your brothers. We're all in your We are your brothers. We are your brothers. We're your brothers. We're all in your Jessica, we are your brothers. We are your brothers.
Well, I'm very happy to bring up someone who's been such a wonderful supporter. A little sad that this is the last time we have her in this capacity, but she's not going anywhere because she's a public servant who keeps on serving. Please welcome, and we're glad to have her back with us again this year, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. It's an honor always to participate on December 1st, World AIDS Day. And I think, as Christian knows, these wonderful quilts mean everything to me, because I remember they used to be at the church on 92nd and Broadway, for those of you who were part of World AIDS Day for so many years. and they're like friends. They mean something to all of us. So I want to thank everybody who keeps them during the rest of the year and who loves them as much as I do. They mean a lot. So congratulations to the quilts and all the people who made them possible. It means a lot. It means a lot. I'm sure you heard from others, and the singing is always great, but this is an emotional day for many of us, particularly those of us who were around during the time when AIDS was at its worst. And I think that we all lost family, friends. I certainly did. And so it's a very emotional day, but it is one of the best memorial celebrations, if that we can call it that we go to. First of all, traditions are important. December 1st means one thing to me and one thing only, which is World AIDS Day. And I think all the hymns and prayers, along with the personal anecdotes about loved ones lost to AIDS, make this service very, very important. It's inspirational, it's moving. Those deaths were a catalyst that brought people together for many years, but particularly in the past 40 years, to raise awareness and advocate for education, prevention, and research to find a cure. And of course, in today's world, it's more important than ever to have this conversation. I want to thank Madam Stone, because she and the quilts go together. She has been like a constant in my life and in yours, and she's been in this fight for so many years. Her commitment and dedication helped to dispel the stigma associated with AIDS and to find a treatment. And I'm grateful for all the work that she's done, because she has been a rock. I think the city's most recent survey on this topic, I think it's 2019 being the most recent, there were 128,419 New Yorkers living with HIV or AIDS, and there were 1,772 new diagnoses that year. And of course, we lost many people to complications still from this awful disease. But we've been fighting it for 40 years. It's still an epidemic. But the fact is that we are soldiers and we're not going to give up. So we have to strengthen our efforts to get everyone tested, especially those at risk categories and in underserved communities. And we have to make sure that PrEP is available and affordable. That's a whole issue with any kind of medical service. It has to be affordable. It's just an ongoing issue. And I know in today's paper, I don't know how you feel about this, but there's a lot of discussion about the injection sites. I happen to support them. It is the most freaking controversial issue. Obviously lost a lot of people because they were not able to be safe. And I'm glad might be the wrong word, but I'm more or less, I am supporting the ones, but you can imagine I just got off a community board screaming at me. In East Harlem and Washington Heights, and I know there'll be other locations. And I think it would be good for all of us to speak up about it, because there is a lot of opposition, so people don't understand that people die if they don't have that kind of support. So I want to say that is my position, and the hell with the press if they don't like. But I think just as important as that discussion is to thank you, because you are communities who care for each other no matter what. You make sure that you get with your friends and your family, you get tested. You make sure that people eat in a healthy fashion. You make sure that you support people who are ill. And that's the spirit that makes us feel less alone in this decades-long battle. So thank you for your advocacy, your determination in the war to eradicate AIDS and HIV. And to remember, hello quilts. Thank you very much. We'll keep fighting. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to my friends at GMHC for the invitation to share brief remarks with you this evening. I'm Dr. Oni Blackstock, a primary care and HIV doctor, and founder and executive director of Health Justice, a racial and health equity consulting firm here in New York City. World AIDS Day serves as an opportunity to take stock of all that has been accomplished in the fight to end the HIV epidemic, as well as take stock of what still needs to be done to reach an end to the epidemic. It's also a time for us to remember those who we have loved and lost along the way. And I want to use this as an opportunity to lift up the name of Robert Rayford. Robert, also known as Bobby, was a young Black teenager who is now thought to have been the earliest known person living with HIV in the United States. He lived with his mother and his brother in an impoverished Black neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. Robert sought care in 1968 for a medical condition and would succumb the following year to complications of what would later become known as AIDS. That so few people, even within the HIV community, know Robert's name speaks to the importance of ensuring that no one, no community is forgotten as we push forward to end the HIV epidemic. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were already differences in the estimated time to the end of the HIV epidemic for different communities. One study even showed that while it would take until the year 2030 to end the HIV epidemic among white New Yorkers, we would have to go far beyond 2040 to see an end to the HIV epidemic among Black and Latinx New Yorkers. How the COVID-19 pandemic has affected these pre-existing HIV inequities is yet to be fully understood, but it's likely to have amplified them. Like the HIV epidemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that while we have effective tools to end the pandemic, a lack of political will and the persistence of systems of power and oppression, such as structural racism, have been substantial barriers to ending both the COVID-19 pandemic as well as the HIV epidemic. Robert Rayford's legacy reminds us that as we work to end the HIV epidemic and the COVID-19 pandemic, we cannot forget those communities that are most burdened. We must continue to advocate and work to dismantle these systems that perpetuate inequities. To this point, the words of tennis great and HIV advocate Arthur Ashe ring true today. Arthur Ashe said on World AIDS Day 1992 the following about the HIV/AIDS epidemic. We want to be able to look back and say to all concerned that we did what we had to do, when we had to do it, and with all the resources required. May we lift up Arthur Ashe's words and Robert Rayford's memory. Thank you so much.
We will now have the blessings of safer sex kits. Number one, creator of all names. We bless the safer sex kits. Amazing. We bless the safer sex kits as we support people to see sexuality understood as a natural part of who we are as individuals, a part of our personality. To know sexuality includes enjoyment of the world through the five senses: taste, touch, smell, hearing, and sight. To see sexuality in the way the most enlightened of our ancestors saw and used sex for connection and revelation of the most enlightened portions of their creative energy. To see sexuality understood as existing through our lives. To see people of all gender and sexual identities allowed and expected to have sexual desire. To override dogma from government and religious institutions that use misinformation about HIV prevention and safer sex in their policies, and To know sexuality includes all feelings, thoughts, and behaviors associated with truly believing we are attractive and can feel attractive. And may we all say, our lives matter. Number 2. We bless the safer sex kits that include male and female condoms and lubricant as we encourage people to see a time when sex is not taboo and not demonized, to see more sex positive thinking, to know that transgender, gender nonconforming, and cisgender individuals who identify as lesbian, bisexual, or heterosexual can feel safe and in control of their bodies when having safer sex. To have sexuality acknowledged as a basic part of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual lives. To see, it's raining condoms. To see transgender, gender nonconforming, and cisgender individuals who identify as gay, bisexual, or heterosexual experience sex as an act of love and in a way of being that promotes a deeper respect for themselves and for those with whom they share their energy and care. To know our own values, beliefs, attitudes, limits, and boundaries, and respect them, and to understand that sex is an expression of our most genuine gift of ourselves to ourselves and to those we love and about whom we care. And the people say, our lives matter. Number 3, we bless the safer sex kits as we advocate for people to have a sexuality that lets us feel attractive regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, race, religion, height, weight, physical or mental ability. To have a sexuality that lets us be ourselves. To see young individuals who have sex with men not being teased for expressing themselves as competent. To continue to be educated about practicing safer sex as a known way to prevent HIV infection and other sexually transmitted infections. To have it seen that sex can be fun and can also fulfill many emotional and spiritual needs. To recognize that sexuality includes how we think and feel, and to allow each of us to define and claim our own personal sexuality. And the people say, our lives matter. Number 4, we bless pre-exposure prophylaxis and post-exposure prophylaxis, also known as PrEP and PEP, and undetectable equals untransmittable, as we nurture people to not let culture, media, religious and government institutions, schools, our friends and family tell us what our sexuality means or what we should do with it. To have sexuality be responsible and healthy and satisfying. To learn how to negotiate safer sex with confidence. To be open to support from peer educators and other allies who continue to bring the diverse messages of HIV prevention to diverse communities. To have sexuality not be a thing of shame and embarrassment, to see sexuality embraced, and to know sexuality includes all feelings, thoughts, and behaviors associated with relationships that include intimacy and sensual and sexual activity. And the people say, our lives matter. Number 5, we bless this basket that is not filled with safer sex kits. Yeah. To demonstrate our support for people who will not have safer sex, to know that for those who cannot have safer sex, the need to feel intimacy or human touch may possibly outweigh the harsh realities of living a life with HIV or AIDS. To recognize that some people may not have the option of luxury of condoms and prep for fear of domestic violence or other forms of abuse. To understand the challenges in negotiating and having safer sex, and to know that people of all gender and sexual identities have been wrestling with HIV for 40 years and creatively looking for all kinds of responsible and sexy solutions to prevent the transmission of HIV. And the people say,
Our lives matter.
And number 6, to the one that has creative energy for our greatest good, we bless the filled basket of safer sex kits and the empty basket as we advocate for people to someday have more options for safer sex, such as vaginal and rectal microbicides and a vaccine, to see less hypersexualization of youth in our culture, to see more attention paid to the perception and impact of images that we all receive, including pornography, to access safe spaces or support groups to share openly about sex, intimacy, relationships, as well as the impact of drugs and alcohol with sex, to see it easier to negotiate a relationship for it not to be so devastating, to see people less frustrated and afraid in their desire to express themselves, and to see sex as a deeper expression of the God or goddess within, to be able to create love in our lives. And the people say,
Our lives matter.
thank you. We'd like to thank the Pride Puppets and their director, Christopher Williams, and their volunteers.
such sweet release. We are one, united we fly, our dance will never cease. Though my friends are gone, they party on, their spirits now run free. Beyond all sorrow, so far beyond, save a place on the dance floor for me. Save a place, save a place, save a place on the dance floor for me. Save a place, save a place, save a place on the dance floor for me.
Thank you, everyone, for the chance. 40 years into the pandemic we call HIV and AIDS, and as we mark the 30th anniversary of Out of the Darkness gathering. Thank you for this chance to gather with so many kindred spirits, so many who fought and who continue to wage the good fight. Thank you to Brent Nicholson Earl for all the hope you have kept alive and all the lives your runs across America to raise funding saved. People magazine may have named you one of its 20 individuals who shaped the 80s, but I think we all could agree tonight, you did more than that. You carved out a vision for a world without HIV and AIDS and kept that vision alive through some of the most challenging of political and social periods. And so I, for one, want to honor you tonight and thank you for your selfless witness. Reflecting on decades of creating community. That's the theme we gather under tonight. Like many of you, at least I'm presuming many of you have lived as long as I have. I remember reading about GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, in the New York Times. Quote, a serious disorder of the immune system that has been known to doctors for less than a year. A disorder that appears to affect primarily male homosexuals has now affected at least 335 people, of whom it has killed 136, officials of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta said yesterday. That May 1982 article recorded. Federal health officials are concerned that tens of thousands of more homosexual men may be silently affected, it went on to say. Ignorance, prejudice and fear, stigmatization, public policies preventing equitable access to healthcare, and just plain stupidity would eventually claim 36 million people of every sexual orientation and gender identity and race and culture and creed and class. Over 700,000 in this country. And as I have lamented in gatherings past, over 20,000 from my own denomination, Metropolitan Community Churches, and over 400 that we know of from a small congregation now housed on West 36th Street. I don't know what you remember. I remember the first woman who ever came to the church office for help and how frightened she and her partner were. And all the men who wanted us to look in their mouths and tell them if those white patches were thrush. And did we think the purplish blotches under their pant legs might be Kaposi sarcoma? I remember the rubber gloves and yellow basin we kept at the church office, and filling it with warm water and bathing those splotched legs, because it was absolutely all we could do to bring anyone any comfort. And paying phone bills for guys who'd lost everything in their fight to stay alive, and battling to hold on to apartments for partners who'd lost the love of their lives, and so-called families who swooped in to claim their possessions, the possessions of their disinherited gay children. Love makes a family, we used to chant. Act up, fight back, fight AIDS. And because I've been asked to keep this to 5 minutes, a really hard thing for preachers, you should testify. Let me get right to the point. Though I remember the desolation and loss and suffering plain as day, the midnight runs to St. Vincent's Hospital and the hundreds and hundreds of funerals, what most changed me, the lesson that even now holds the power to meet the goal of ending HIV and AIDS by 2035, was what I saw us do as a community when we began directing our anger and our pain and our loss into pushing for housing rights and relational recognition and funding for research and the development of treatments to save lives, when we maybe not stopped mourning our losses, but began putting our grief's strength to the task of ending stigmatization and addressing racism and misogyny. Those battles are not over, because community isn't something you create and then it's done. It's something you give your life to seeking out in the most unlikely and challenging of places and sustaining. We have yet to close the gap between how white gay men are treated in this city's healthcare system and trans women of color are. But we have learned and are every day striving to stand in that gap. We've learned, though we don't always do it well, how to face and do life together, which is an important lesson to hold on to and dive more deeply into as donor funding for HIV and AIDS responses declines and legal and social and policy conditions get in the way of people accessing treatment, especially for those in communities left the furthest behind repetitively and over time. It's an important lesson, that call of life, every life, is to learn to live together in peace and with goodwill and generosity and compassion, sharing, not hoarding resources. The United States has stored over 4 times the amount of COVID-19 vaccine it would take to fully inoculate every person in this country, while many in our world are left only to whisper a prayer in the morning, hoping to live through another day. You may think that's unrelated, but it's not, because you and I know how to end a pandemic and the power of caring for each other, all others, as if they were family, because they are, our brothers and our sisters, all children of God. We know what sharing resources can do and has done for many of the people who are alive in this room tonight. Facing and doing life together is an important lesson as young boys shoot and kill people and get away with it. Kenosha. And old men put public cartoons about killing their congressional colleagues online, Congress, and get away with that, which is not the way things are supposed to be. Our young are supposed to dream dreams, the prophet Joel says, and our old see visions. Our focus is always to be how much better we together can make tomorrow. And 30, 40 years of confronting HIV and AIDS, from certain death sentences to PrEP and PEP, have taught us, as Martin Luther King once put it, we will all learn to live together, or most assuredly die together. We've stood and are continuing to stand in the gap between what is and what could be, watching for each day's chance to remake our lives and how the world actually does things. And we've had some successes. The people here living with HIV and AIDS tonight are our witnesses. And we still face a lot of hurdles. But 30, 40 years of creating community has taught me where there is a will, there is absolutely a way. John Mogabgab says, we need to believe that together we can stay in uncomfortable places long enough and attentively enough to be found by a truth larger than any we might discover on our own. And we, you and I, did that, stayed in that deep pit that was the beginning of this pandemic, and literally raised ourselves into the light. We learned how not to hide, and how to fight, and what to do when life hands you crap. AIDS isn't over, but neither is our resiliency and strength as a community. There's a story that ancient rabbis tell about the parting of the Red Sea. As the story goes, the people neared the water's edge with the Egyptian army and its chariots advancing closer and closer. When they got to the edge, they just stood still, not knowing what to do, feeling like they had no good options in front of them. Then one person named Neshan stepped into the water and kept moving forward, step by muddy step. Legend has it, not until it was nose deep did the waters actually part and the people pass through. We're at that water's edge with lots and lots of things. HIV rates still increasing for transgender people and men and women of color. Big gaps in access to primary health care for many in our city, not to mention the nation and our world. And that has to do with race and gender identity and sexual orientation and just plain money. Stigma attaching to anyone knowing we're positive or need treatment or got tested, not just in faraway places, but right here at home. Over 1/2 of new HIV infections in the United States still showing up in key populations like men having sex with men, and those who are in prison, and people who inject drugs. Globally, about 38 million people are living with HIV and AIDS, but only 68% of them are on antiretroviral therapy. A good start, but not what will end this pandemic by 2035. Another 68% of people living with HIV are in sub-Saharan Africa, where food and water and survival in general are a daily challenge. But this I know, this is the lesson all these years of building community has taught me. If we'll just wade in any way we can, we'll get to that promised land of undetectable and untransmittable. This I know. I will forever be grateful to people like you, Brent, and all those who waded into unknown waters and uncharted territory for the sake of making a way out of the darkness. Amen.
I saw the quilt, as many of you might have, in 1980 87 in Washington, DC. The next year I came home, I've been involved with the quilt. I would have never have thought then that I would have traveled the world, had panel making workshops in all these countries that you see above you. And the power and the spirit that people's names that would not be forgotten have not been forgotten. We only have a small section here. These panels are from developing countries. I refer to them. They're not 12 feet by 12 feet because most developing countries don't have rooms that have 12-foot ceilings. So the 6 feet by 12 feet work great to go into schools, especially in Africa. I'm appreciative of Brent, as we all are. The 4 panels you see in front of you are from 4 of the many years, of the 30 years we've been doing Out of the Darkness. I got roped in when I moved to New York the year after I got here, like in 95, and I've been involved ever since. It is an inspiration to have people who still want to remember names. And it's my message to all of you that we continue to keep remembering people's names. Thanks.
Jeff, for keeping the quilts prominent in people's lives and for taking the New York chapter into a much broader realm, a global realm. What used to be the New York chapter of the AIDS Project is now the International AIDS Prevention Initiative, and deals with global quilt. To look back on almost 3 decades of presenting Out of the Darkness is quite awesome. I will attempt to briefly encapsulate the evolution of our annual effort to observe this day of activism, life-saving information, and remembrance of those we've lost. In 1992, World AIDS Day was 4 years old, but there have been few opportunities for New Yorkers to collectively participate in World AIDS Day, except to watch the exterior lighting on some landmark buildings be extinguished for 15 minutes as part of Visual AIDS' Night Without Light initiative. So at 7:45 p.m. on December 1st, 1992, as the lights went out on the Empire State Building and other buildings around Madison Square, more than 1,000 people lit candles in remembrance and hope and marched from there to Washington Square. The march concluded with a rally and the singing of Amazing Grace. Area has continued this effort for the past 29 years, collaborating with different groups along the way. Some aspects of Out of the Darkness have changed, but the one constant has always been the lighting of candles and marching in memory and solidarity. In 1994, in support of Housing Works' 24-hour vigil and reading of names at City Hall, Out of the Darkness began with a rally in Washington Square with musical performances, and then candles were lit and we marched all the way to City Hall. The march continued to the vigil every year after that until 2001, when the vigil had to be moved to Harlem due to the tragedies of September 11th. After 5 years of braving the elements with an outdoor rally on December 1st, Area moved it indoors in 1998, beginning a collaboration with the Names Project New York City, which continues to this day as they have evolved, as I said, into International AIDS Prevention Initiative. Jeff did leave out something I want to mention, and that is we have a new signatures panel for this year. It's at the back of the house. Please take a moment, even after the gathering, and when we're going to be participating in food together in a few minutes, but take a moment to remember someone that you may have lost. Over the years, the venues have changed, but the indoor program has always included displaying sections of the AIDS Memorial quilt and leaving memorials upon that signature panel. The Keith Haring Foundation has provided a central sponsorship of this annual event every year since its inception. When the Housing Works Visual returned to City Hall in 2003, the candles were brought to them once again for a variety of reasons, especially the length of that distance and the desolation of the last half after we crossed Canal Street each year. The number of people joining us to City Hall dwindled over the years to finally just a handful in 2004. In hope of rebuilding participation in the Candlelight March, the route was shortened and the march went from the center up 8th Avenue through the heart of Chelsea and concluded at Colonial House Inn on West 22nd Street, the original site of GMHC. Mel Sharon, the owner of the hotel, who'd given GMHC their first home there in 1982, welcomed all of the marchers inside for the reading of names of those who died of AIDS. Since 2008, a new coalition of groups, always financed by the Herring Foundation, has come together in a spirit of unity to reinvent Out of the Darkness in hope of renewing commitment to fighting AIDS and regenerating activism and awareness. Over these recent years, we've incorporated new traditions, such as the flagging and fanning and the blessing of the safe sex kits. This year, for the first time, we have a new tradition with these amazing Pop Pride puppets. Thank you so much. One aspect I'd hope never to see repeated was NBC lighting the Rockefellers Christmas tree on World AIDS Day. When they did it for the first time in 1999, with the help of ACT UP New York, we staged a protest, and a group of activists chained themselves to the tree and were arrested. Sent a representative down promising their egregious lack of sensitivity to the solemnness of this day would never be repeated. Unfortunately, they abandoned that promise this year, most likely because they didn't want to miss the opportunity to advertise their live production of Annie tomorrow night. Once again, the almighty buck has overruled social conscience. Please let NBC know how you feel about this and request that they never do it again. It's hard not to think of all of the people who are no longer with us. We're dedicating our World AIDS Day efforts this year to Anita Ross Fine. As president of Area's board, she anchored the Run Around America, and she stage managed almost every one of our Out of the Darkness efforts. We are blessed, though, to have many people with us tonight with a long history with this annual effort. My dear friend and colleague, Roddy Shaw, probably traveled the furthest to be here, all the way across the country. He was an essential part of the Rainbow Roll team who inline skated the rainbow flag with me from San Francisco to New York in 1994. He also helped Tom Fawcett produce two of the earliest of these World AIDS Day observances. My colleagues from the planning committee have been providing invaluable support for more than 12 years now. They are so much more than colleagues. They are my family. And that is certainly true of the extraordinary singers, musicians, composer, producers, and director of For the Love of Friends, the new documentary about our years of work to end AIDS. One of those producers, who is also an invaluable member of our planning committee, Barbara Martinez, is now going to offer more thanks to everyone who made this year's Out of the Darkness possible. I'm going to close by thanking you all for being here. Some of you every year. Together, we are indeed creating community while we contend with now an additional pandemic. Bless your hearts.
I can't believe I have to follow Brent. All right, Brent. I love Brent. Whew. Well, as terrible as it is to lose a brother to AIDS-related complications, I've become a part of a dedicated and loving community since he passed 31 years ago. It has been an honor and a pleasure to work with this group and to help organize this 30th anniversary of Out of the Darkness. For many of you here, our jobs, our lives, our activism are all dedicated to honoring those we've lost, supporting those living with HIV, and creating safe spaces for dialogue and truth. At this very moment, fellow activists around the world are lighting their candles. Our work here is local, but we are heard and watched internationally. Whether this is your first candlelight vigil or your 30th, we encourage you to light the way for others. These last 2 years have seen an increase in homelessness, mental health challenges, PTSD, anti-Asian crime, racism, and COVID. We are going through a healing process, but we are the survivors. Let's make the most of our time. Let's make the most of the opportunities we have. Many people around the world don't have the vaccine. I'm very happy that everyone here has shown through vaccination as a way of helping our community. So tonight, we start by thanking and acknowledging the Keith Haring Foundation for primary financial support for Out of the Darkness and for the use of the Keith Haring artwork, Silence Equals Death. St. John's Lutheran Church, where we have not only found a home for our event, but welcoming arms. We missed being here last year. Congratulations on your 200th anniversary. I thank the New York City AIDS Memorial. We had a wonderful candlelight vigil. Thank you, Dave Harper, and happy 5th anniversary to this public memorial. We thank the readers of names, a tribute to the many loved ones we've lost over these 40 years. Our guest speakers, virtually and in person. We thank Matt Bainey, who spoke at the vigil, Oni Blackstock, who's always an inspiration. She spoke virtually. Manhattan Borough President Gil Brewer, the Reverend Pat Baumgardner, whose words will always live in my heart because they're powerful. Reverend Mark, Brent, Jeff, of course, Krishna, the planning committee, our amazing flaggers, the singers, the ensemble For the Love of Friends. Our pride puppets, displaying their art and activism. Shanira Delgado, who's graduated us to Instagram this year, our social media. Video direction and video, Porta Simmons and Jason. Our volunteers, Wally, the volunteers that are back there preparing this night's feast. And we would also, of course, our ASL. And speaking of the ensemble, we will be having our second private screening of For the Love of Friends. We had our summer screening in July. And as part of our World AIDS Day event, we will have a winter screening this Friday, December 3rd. If you haven't RSVP'd, we've sent out a lot of invitations up to now, and you're still interested in participating, please see me at some point, give me your name so that I could add you to our guest list. And we would like to share the trailer from For the Love of Friends with you, just to give you a little taste of what the documentary is about.
Today, we're going to talk to a man who is going to run 10,000 miles across the US.
He just woke up one morning and went, all my friends are dying. No one seems to care. I'm gonna do something about this.
In the 80s, we had really no other way to respond to the epidemic. His response was, why not run?
It's really 10,000 miles around the United States. I'm running around the country to hopefully circle the country with a net of concern.
And I said, what?
Did you have a lot of training? Are you having a lot of training before?
There's one little problem here. You're not a runner.
He had never run a day in his life.
And he was gonna run 20 miles a day for 20 months.
And I thought it was just an idea, and that he would come up with a more practical idea. Silly me.
Real enemies in the fight against AIDS are indifference and denial. That means somebody else is not going to touch my community, it's not going to touch my life. It's very hard for them to deny that I ran down Convince Street.
He put a face on AIDS as he ran around the country.
That was still a time where we were like, that vaccine is around the corner. We didn't realize we were at the tip of the iceberg of the people who were going to get sick and die. You know, it went on for, it's still going on.
He's as driven as ever. I think he's going to be driven until we get a solution to this goddamn plague.
He's like, I devoted my life to activism and everything else is immaterial.
I feel as though if I had the strength to do it, I should run around America again. As you can see, I couldn't possibly, but the message still needs to get out there.
Going nowhere. I
now in the fellowship hall for some food and some beverages. It's this way. We're going to line folks up to start to go through. There's lots of standing, so pretend you're at a cocktail hour. There are some chairs we cannot eat in the sanctuary. Leave your stuff here. The doors are locked. Thank you all for being here. And for our virtual folks, thank you for being here.
And please sign the signature square.
Square.